discharging council's deliberative and decision-making functions. There's no set agenda and no minutes that will be taken during this session. A copy of the information presented at this session will be made available on council's website. Whereabouts on the website and decision-making functions. Whereabouts on the website. There's no set agenda and no minutes that will be taken during this session. A copy of the information presented at this session will be made available on council's website. Oh, nice. Whereabouts. Is that outside? And decision-making functions. Whereabouts. So there's no set agenda and no minutes. council, infrastructure and engineering, and then asset management. And underneath it is transport, asset management plan, stormwater, asset management plan, and building asset management plan. And that's it. Yeah.
Yep, so there should be 4.
Transport, stormwater and buildings. Yeah, building is 2013 version. Stormwater is the 2013 version and the transport is the 2013 version. It's just good if people are watching, they can find where they are and they can have a look at them.
Yeah, definitely. It's really helpful for people to be able to find them. I agree. Looking at this site at the same time as you know, Karen, the documents that are on there are the 2013 adopted plans. So the transport and stormwater asset management plans are actually outdated and they need to have the superseded versions that we adopted at the end of last year uploaded.
Right,
so I'll take that. I will take that on notice.
These are the old ones, yes. And we do have new ones, just so people are aware. They're not up on the website just yet. So I just thought I'd highlight that. It's important that we get the up-to-date documents. Okay. All right. Sorry.
The actual current ones are actually under your corporate publications. So it's corporate publications and you've got the... So you've got
annual report, beautification, climate emergency, biodiversity, community, digital, economic, environmental, Gawler Invest, Gawler Rural Land Use, Gawler Urban Rivers, Gawler Walking,
and then open space asset management plan,
stormwater asset management plan, stormwater, transport, but you don't have the buildings.
So the building one is currently being updated at the moment. Those are the 3 current ones that have been adopted that are on the corporate publications. The building asset management plan is currently being updated and reviewed. So the only one that hasn't been adopted by council. So the 2013 one is still the current one for the building master plan.
So wouldn't it be good to have the current one under the corporate publications?
Yeah, we can adjust that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'm trying.
Get on. Get on.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, it's on. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, it's on. I'll just do it from this side. So just to give some examples of service level. So it's off, from an operational level, it's considering how often we mow our parks, frequency of street sweeping, opening of library, opening hours of library, how many public toilets we provide. So just to give some examples of service level. So it's off, from an operational level, it's considering how often we mow our parks, frequency of street sweeping, opening of library, I don't know what's happening with opening hours of library, how many public toilets we provide. So just to give some examples of
Any IT
service level. So it's off, from an operational level, it's considering how often we mow our parks, frequency of street sweeping, opening of library, opening hours of library, how many public toilets we provide. So just to give some examples of
any IT
service level. So it's off,
Emma, I'm going to ring
from
in
an operational level, it's considering how often we mow our parks, frequency of street sweeping, opening of library.
So if anybody's watching at home,
opening hours of
got that
library,
echo
how many
happening
public
again.
toilets we provide.
So it's gonna quite annoying for us here. So
Service level, so
Emma,
I'm going to ring in operational level, health, street sweeping, opening of library.
so if anybody's watching at home, got that echo happening again.
toilets we provide.
So it's gonna quite annoying for us here. So
Service level, so
Emma,
I'm going to ring in operational level, health, street sweeping, opening of library.
so if anybody's watching at home, got that echo happening again.
toilets we provide.
So it's quite annoying for us here. So
Service level, so I'm going to ring in operational level, health, street sweeping, opening of library.
so if anybody's watching at home, got that echo happening again.
toilets we provide.
So it's quite annoying for us here. So
Service level, so I'm going to ring in operational level, health,
while we're waiting, I'll just give you a. I can't do anything. Just for the newer members that are sitting around the table, Sharon will give, she's got quite a few slides here. While we're waiting, and then we'll get stuck into these project bids, but we're going to go page by page. So I'll name the page and I'll ask anyone to bring up, and we'll start at the top and work our way down. Sharon will give any slides here. Just just raise your hand. Then we'll get stuck into page, and we'll also include the page. So I'll name the page, and I'll ask anyone to bring up, and we'll start at the top and work our way down. Sharon will give any slides here. Just raise your hand. Then we'll get stuck into page, and we'll also include the page. So I'll name the page, and I'll ask anyone to bring up, and we'll start at the top and work our way down. Sharon will give any slides here. Just raise your hand. Then we'll get stuck into page, and we'll also include the page. So I'll name the page, and I'll ask anyone to bring up, and we'll start at the top and work our way down. Sharon will give any slides here. Just raise your hand. Then we'll get stuck into page,
Sorry about that. So hopefully we should be all okay now. So in relation to, so when we're determining considerations for in service for the service level, so obviously we take into account the public safety, accessibility. Does it contribute to the well-being, the impact on the environment? What sort of investment is actually going to be needed to fund it, and do they comply with all the relevant legislation and technical standards? Yes. So normally with an over-servicing, that probably would be reflected in obviously the cost to actually deliver that service. So then it's a decision as to whether you actually want to lower that service level down if you consider that you're actually over-servicing on a particular, in a particular area.
So who determines the service level?
So obviously it would be a combination of that the service level is set in the asset management plan. So asset management plan, the staff would actually make the recommendation as to what the level of service for particular assets, and then it would actually come back to the chamber and to determine whether that's the appropriate service level and whether you'd consider that as being over-servicing or not.
Just finally, is it benchmarked against other comparable councils?
I'm looking at Wendy, and so no. So normally service standards are probably more to meet unique to the community and all that sort of stuff, and there's community expectations as well. But I'll hand over to Wendy.
So there's some guiding service levels in documents like the International Public Works Committee Association documentation. So they set a lot of the service levels for civil works, for example. When we've been looking at collating some of the background information for the town services workforce strategy review, we've gone back and looked at there's been a lot of historical documents endorsed by council which actually set or guide the service levels that our horticulture team follow. So when we go through the workforce strategy, you'll see all that documentation and how it aligns in terms of benchmarking. Whether there has been some benchmarking done as those historical documents have been developed and endorsed, I don't know for sure. I'll look into that.
So there's a state government initiative, or the LGA drove an initiative for benchmarking across all councils, all SA councils, and you can go and see what councils spend on a particular item, particular service. It's still particular to the area. However, that's what that is designed to do. And that was put in place, I think, 18 months ago. Yeah.
And so obviously the service level set will depend on, have an influence on the asset renewal and asset programs, and also the service delivery standards. From that perspective as well. And I suppose one of the things is to sit there and say, you know, from I suppose that example of over-servicing, you know, it might be unreasonable for a small cul-de-sac or a small residential street that has a few houses on it to have an expectation that you'd actually have a footpath, a formed footpath on both sides of the roads. Whereas if you've actually got a transport or pedestrian route outside of a school, from like the train station to the school and all that sort of stuff, it might actually, you know, from a service level perspective, it's actually probably quite reasonable to have formed footpaths on both sides of the street. So that's the balancing act of when determining those service levels, and making sure that you've actually got, I suppose, the reasoning, the purpose that it's, the service level actually fits the purpose that it's actually designed to actually do, you know. So just in relation to, expenditure categories and life cycle costs. So obviously there's 3 types of expenditures that we actually talk about. So our recurrent cost, this is actually the operational cost to actually for the asset. So these are taking into account the fact of, you know, our mowing would actually be a recurrent cost, just to actually maintain and provide the service level. So there's a couple of examples up there. Then we've actually got renewal costs, which is actually making sure that the asset is actually maintained at the service level that it was actually designed to actually deliver at that standard, and making sure that it doesn't deteriorate. So that's when we actually talk about our, you'd probably hear me, I'll refer it to as a whole of life asset management or renewal program. And that's actually just making sure that we're doing the interventions in our assets at the right particular time to actually make sure that we maintain that service standard. So the recurrent costs and those operational maintenance and operational is part of our operating budget. So that's actually funded, effectively funded by rates and any other income that we can generate through the general operations of council. The renewal costs is actually funded via rates through our depreciation charge, because that's actually how we're recovering or amortizing the cost of those assets, to ensure that the people that are actually receiving the benefit are actually making a contribution to the cost of the purchase of those assets. And then we actually have the growth cost. And this is where we talk about upgrade, expansion and new assets. So an upgrade, an example of an upgrade would be where we convert an unformed footpath to a formed footpath, where actually effectively it's still a footpath, but the service level of that footpath has actually improved. So we've actually treated it as an upgrade. Expansion, so Carbeethan Reserve, what we're actually doing at Carbeethan Reserve, we're expanding the playing fields, so it's an upgraded asset. Whereas Reed Reserve, we don't have a playground at Reed Reserve currently, so that would actually be classified as a new asset. All of these as part of the capital project, capital budget, and are either funded predominantly either through borrowings or grant funding, if we can actually receive, fortunate to receive any grant funding. And with respect to the growth assets or the growth costs, this is where our strategies and plans and policies will actually influence the level of the planning of those assets and the expenditure. Yes, Nathan.
So if I use this table as a bit of an example, am I right to turn around and say, you can flip it around to give the life cycle of any given asset, the growth, the upgrade, the expansion, the new is the infant, you know, and then we work into its maintenance to make sure that service level's met, and then in the end, it's to be renewed. So yes, that's sort of the life cycle of how an asset works.
Although you would actually also have some maintenance costs associated with those renewal assets as well, because effectively there is still even, so the renewal is actually the intervention. So you will have some maintenance between the time from the asset gets created or it to the point where it actually gets renewed. There will still be some operational and maintenance costs associated with that as well. So. And I think the important thing that to actually remember as well is that realistically, especially with the growth assets, your recurrent costs will be increased because you're actually adding assets. So you actually got increased operational costs to actually to provide those assets. So effectively, we've got Reed Reserve, we'll have an increase in our operational costs, our renewal, recurrent costs, because we now have to actually maintain that. So we actually have to do our playground inspections, we have to do our lawn mowing and stuff that we probably wouldn't otherwise do in that area because we're actually increasing the service standard and we're actually adding new assets to that area as well. So there's the ownership costs that we need to consider that will get spread across the life of that asset, but then there's actually ongoing that we need to take into account when we're actually doing our budgets and our planning going forward.
So just on that, if we use the Reed Reserve Playground as an example, just say in 15, 20 years' time, that becomes end of life and we rip it out and we start again with a new playground. Does that become a new asset, start from scratch, or is that actually a part of the renewal, like our replacement of Road Sill? Do we change that to say replacement of Reed Street Playground and it's still in the same life cycle? Does that make sense? So if I buy a new car, yeah, does that make sense? Yep.
So obviously it depends on what you're doing. So normally you would actually have over the life from inception to renewal, there will be interventions. So it depends on whether you're actually replacing it at the like value. So like, you know, it will be a like asset for today's standards and all that sort of stuff. But we're replacing a swing with a swing, it will just basically be, that's where it's renewed. But if we're actually enhancing it by adding extra play equipment and all that sort of stuff, then that would actually be considered as an upgrade because we're actually in adding to the asset base. So with your renewal costs, the idea is to actually make sure that you're actually doing your interventions at your making sure that you're doing your maintenance and to maintain it to the service level, and you're doing your interventions at the right point so your actual service level is not dropping, so you don't necessarily have to do that complete upgrade at that point in time as well. And it is a bit of a, I suppose, a science, Wendy, to actually make sure that you're renewing at the right time, because if you renew too late, where you actually get the increase in your recurrent spend through increased maintenance costs as well. So you're maintaining it, or you can't provide the service level because you're actually going to have to bring a swing out of operations because it's not safe or it's not at the service standard that it actually should be to continue in operations.
We've still got at least 10 slides and we're not even going to get this done if we're not careful. So
The
yeah.
important
Yeah.
topic. So what I'm hearing is if you bought a new car and it's the first time you own that car, you would then pay rego, petrol, everything like that. Once that car came to a certain lifespan, to get rid of it at the optimal time is best for the bank at that time, and then replace it with a new car. You hold it for too long, then you invite all the problems that come with that car. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Keep going, Sharon.
So obviously growth relates to new assets, it's discretionary. So effectively adding new assets is actually at the discretion. And normally it's undertaken to meet the changing community needs and expectations. Priorities should actually be based on the community needs and obviously funding availability, because we still need to actually be able to, I suppose, bring the asset into create the asset. But also need to maintain it. And as I said, it results in ongoing increase in operational maintenance expenses and increased ownership through, depending on how we fund it. Asset renewal relates to our existing infrastructure and assets. What we actually want to do is make sure that we can ensure we renew at a point where we can actually continue to deliver the service that it was constructed to deliver on. Or that it's actually as the service standard that it was actually supposed to be provided. And again, the target is to renew and replace at a rate that ensures that that service level is being maintained and you're not having an increasing cost to maintain or operate that particular asset as well. So. And again, so renewals are prioritised by obviously looking at whether there's a high consequence of failure. This is pretty much determined based on our condition rating. What's the impact if that asset actually failed? and how many users would actually be impacted by that. Increasing operational or maintenance costs. And the potential to reduce the life cycle costs, so the maintenance and all that sort of stuff as well. So those are the sorts of things that when Wendy's team's actually determining what the renewal program is, and when footpaths are due to be replaced, when roads are due to be resealed, when curbs and our existing or playground equipment, it's all these things that are actually taken into account to determine and how we actually prioritise those assets. Condition audits, basically we take a condition audit on a rolling, we're converting to a rolling 5-year program. So we'll do one asset class each year on a rolling 5-year basis. So in 22-23, we are doing our civil infrastructure asset program. So that's where we will actually get a full assessment on our roads, curbs, footpaths, as to what condition they will actually be. And then from that, they will develop the long-term renewal program, which would feed in through to the review of our asset management plan for the transport assets, which we need to do. Normally what you would actually sit there and say, so any asset that's rated 1 to 2 is just normal general operational maintenance. So it would be those assets between that are from a condition from 3 to 4, 3 to 5, that would be considered in the, I suppose, the early stage of the renewal program. And those very good and good ones, you would find that potentially are, depending on the nature of the asset and what that intervention period is from that life cycle. I'll make this available for you on the hub as well. So pretty much this is just to provide an overview of the value of our assets that we actually have. So obviously the majority of our assets are the transport assets, which takes into account sealed roads, unsealed roads, footpaths, curbs, gutters, bridges and culverts, roundabouts and car parks. Based on the 2018 condition assessment, which was the last time that was done, 65% were considered good to very good, and 35% were considered fair to very poor. Just in relation to, this is the types of works on the other side of what would actually do and what would be considered as what part of the budget. Based on the current asset management plan, our renewal spend is on average around about $2.9 million a year. And this year, when we go through the budget bid proposals, there's proposals for equivalent of around about 2.8 million. And that's what we actually want to do for each year. We want to make sure that we're renewing the assets that we actually plan to actually renew and keep that between that 90 to 110% ratio. Growth things are talking about new, like, so from a road safety improvement, it might be a new roundabout at an intersection that's coming off of a new housing development. There's increased traffic flow. And again, asset management plan at the moment says 3.2. We've got around about 2.3 million of growth, what we would consider growth assets. And that's predominantly the new footpaths and new gutter programs. Yes, Cody.
So it mentions potholes in there, which I'll just bring up since it's something that came up a fair amount during the elections and all that kind of thing. Where is that represented in terms of where you would find how that's done on the budget?
It's under recurrent. That's what it says.
So obviously the potholes, to repair the potholes, depending on the size of the pothole, obviously. So if it's a really big pothole, it would probably be considered as a renewal. But I'm assuming that you're meaning just general potholes. So that would just be part of the civil maintenance budget under from the depot. So that would just take into account the labour and the material cost to fill that. But I suppose that's where if a road is got lots of potholes, that would be where the condition assessment would actually consider and whether that from a service level as to whether that's actually due for, should be identified as a reseal. So depending on the extent of the potholes and the roads and all that sort of stuff as well.
So I think maybe a follow-up piece of information on that question, Cody, is so when a customer or a resident identifies a pothole and it goes into our CRM system, so our town maintenance team will go out and assess it. If it's a small pothole, they'll fill it up themselves as part of their daily operations or as quick as they can. If it's a larger one, it will go up to our civil team to try and assess how they can do it within their capacity. Let's say it's a street that isn't in the next 3 years of being earmarked for being resealed. What we do as we're going through our process of listing out our streets for the annual budget bids is, while we've got a list based on our asset management plans, we also take into consideration real-time changes in the street network. So if we've had 10 CRMs about potholes in a particular street, you know, we will raise that in priority as part of our budget bid. So it's not a rigid, there's a table in a 10-year list in an asset management plan. We actually bring in real-time data and we do like 360 approaches to understand, well, you know, if the potholes have gone here and the curb's gone there, is it to do with the tree? What's happened to the footpath? And we actually try and coordinate all those works to get, you know, the best outcome in one set of works per location.
So obviously also from an asset planning perspective, there's a whole heap of challenges that we actually need to take into account when we're actually developing those plans and thinking about that. Obviously, the biggest one here is from population growth, and the impact that actually has on our local roads. Also, as a growth, we've got an increase in heavy vehicle movements, and obviously that has a huge impact on our road network and may actually result, depending on those roads and where the development is happening, it actually might have an impact on that. We have to actually intervene earlier than what we would normally do if we didn't have that heavy vehicle movement. And obviously climate change is something that we need to consider, one in the sense of what the impact of climate change has on our assets from a damage perspective, but also even like, you know, some things about whether there's, not that we provide public transport, but from an advocacy of public transport, so we can actually make sure, I suppose, minimise some of those traffic movements on a network if you've actually got an appropriate travel transport option. Some of the things that we're actually put forward as part of the 23-24 budget is obviously the integrated transport management strategy, which takes into account the whole of the town, the growth framework, car parking and the parking deck investigations. Obviously, the other things that we do is that we're undertaking our condition assessment this year. We'll update our transport asset management plan, and obviously delivering our whole of life asset programs.
Yeah, recently we adopted the car parking strategy. I think it was last council meeting, and we agreed that we needed to, you know, put in a multi-storey car park. Now, does that go into the asset management plan and then the financial management plan? So does that push everything out?
So decisions of council obviously are taken into account when we actually do the review of the asset management plan and also of the long-term financial plan as well. So realistically, you know, so those projects will be incorporated in that plan, and then effectively then it's just a question on what needs to be bumped, if something needs to be bumped, or depending on an assessment as to when realistically the delivery of the construction is actually going to happen. So, and that will just basically be a judgment call based on everything else that's in the melting pot, and would make those recommendations based on where we're at in a planning cycle for that, as to what that determines, and obviously the expectations of the council and also of the community as to when the delivery of some of those things are actually happening as well, so.
Sharon, the government buses that run around our town, when we talk about the transport management strategy, no one's using them still. Whose department does that come under to look into some way that whether we budget for something as a really super duper promotion to get people to use those buses, because those buses are such an asset to this town. And there's not really been any promotion of it. So we don't take that on as an asset, do we? Those buses?
They're state government buses. They're all state government buses. They're not our assets. They're not our assets.
But it is there and it's working. It's not working.
Yeah, but it's a state government responsibility to get it working. No, it's not our asset. No. Yeah. The stops are, the bus stops are, we've put them in. Well, some people catch them. My neighbour catches a bus all the time. Yeah. My neighbour catches the bus all the time. Yeah. Yeah. Some people use the bus. Yeah. Some people use the bus. Yeah. It's quite valuable if you do get on the bus, I think, but yeah. Ethan?
Thanks, mate. No, just a quick question. That's like, you've changed. That's okay. I saw roundabouts and bridges and on there. Are they like, so are they our assets, council's assets, not Department of Transport assets?
It depends on which road they're on.
Okay, so those 30 bridge or whatever so I can't remember the numbers. Are they just council's assets, not DIT? Yep, no worries. Thank you.
Okay.
So obviously we have stormwater drainage assets. I won't go through the whole thing, make it available for you. So obviously, based on the last condition assessment, the assets are in fairly good condition. From a asset management plan, we have around about $100,000 average renewal spend, and that's what we've got in the budget bids. And for growth, it's around about 920,000. Again, we've probably got some challenges with regard to that. Obviously, from a growth perspective, it's the development density and obviously the increasing in the hard spaces, which actually creates more runoff. So we actually have to upgrade our stormwater network to actually ensure that we can actually manage that stormwater runoff without actually doing flooding. But also we need to actually make sure that we actually have some challenges to ensure that the capture of that, so we're actually not putting a lot of the, I suppose, the rubbish down into the waterways from the Gawler River perspective as well. So, so how we can do that. Obviously with aging infrastructure, we need to actually, again, make sure that that's upgraded to improve our flood immunity, especially from that perspective. So, and then also from an environmental sustainability, what we can do to actually capture our stormwater and treat it and reuse it effectively as well. So some of the things that we've got here is obviously some of erosion control, updating our asset management plan, some water sensitive urban design projects that have been that you'll consider, designs for the Murray Street forward to actually reduce, that's one area which is probably over the last winter where the service level has actually been impacted significantly from that flooding. So potentially there's things about whether we actually need to lift that so we can actually have, don't necessarily have to close that. And then we've got the whole of life program. Open space is predominantly our playgrounds, our street furniture, and all that sort of stuff. Sorry, I don't know how many parks and gardens, parks and reserves that we have, and I was supposed to find that out, but time got away from me. So I will update that number. So yeah, so this is again with regard to asset management plan, we sort of sit there and say that we'll spend about $300,000 a year renewing it. This year's budget proposals is around about 230. And with the asset management plan, I've excluded Carbeetham Reserve because that's probably a one-off major project that's not normal from a sort of skews the numbers. So it's around about 800 as a normal upgrade. This year we've got 600,000 and that's pretty much Reed Reserve, which we've actually also got grant funding for that as well. So same scenario, obviously changing population, expectations, smaller houses, no backyards, and all that sort of stuff. So people are actually having an increasing demand of having open space within walking distance from their home as the substitute backyard. Again, increasing because of the increase in population, wanting, I suppose, those spaces for competitive and non-competitive sporting facilities, passive and organised. Obviously, the more reserves that we have to maintain, we have to water them because everyone wants a green reserve. No one wants a brown reserve. So from an environmental perspective, it's basically that increase in the water consumption. So how do we actually maintain those green reserves, those green parks?
I've just picked up Apex Park, netball court upgrade. I think, isn't that the Hallam Drive Netball Association netball court upgrade? It's not Apex Park.
Oh, okay.
Essex
Parks.
Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Essex Park is further up.
Yep.
Actually, it's actually not Essex Park.
Yep.
It's the Essex Park master plan, but yes.
Yep, that's fine.
Netball Association court. You're probably better off calling it the Netball Association, then everyone knows where it is. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, I was going to say with the open spaces, I think if everybody could actually read the report done by Jerry Charlton a couple of years ago, he addressed a lot of those issues and actually said we should be reducing our green space in size. So I think everybody, if everyone could actually get that document and read it, it's quite valuable.
You want to put your mic on so everyone can hear you, Paul?
The existing councillors have read it because it was a couple of years ago, but I'm sure we could make it available for everybody. It was what Jerry Charlton wrote.
Yeah, that would be great if that was.
Yeah, because it actually addresses all those issues with open spaces. I can't remember what it's
Jerry
called.
Charlton, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Jerry Charlton wrote it, yeah. And he did a big review of all the open spaces and gave a lot of
That's right.
recommendations. And
it's quite a good document.
yeah. And I think we adopted it and we should be actually implementing what he was talking about.
Okay.
Because some of that, I agree with that people want green space everywhere, but Jerry was saying that if you did, you'll just go broke, basically. So that's sort of, we just need everyone to read that, I reckon.
David Hughes.
Yeah, just on that, last year the councillors actually went on a tour and we looked at some of the green spaces and some of the work that Jerry's been consulting back to council staff on with remote sensing sensors to make sure the reserves aren't overwatered and ovals and stuff like that. And I thought that was pretty good because it actually explained the relationship with consultants working with council staff. And I thought that was a really good example of it actually working really well too.
Helen, just turn it on. Thank you.
Right, thank you. In the very earliest governance material that we got, the training materials, there was talk of a council tour, but it seems to have disappeared. Is there any ideas when that should be happening, please?
I've got no idea. I have raised it a couple of times because I think it's important that we do have a tour. Any thoughts from staff, or can we enlighten the elected members?
Yes, I'm hoping that we can coordinate our diaries and it'll be towards the end of March. No later than that.
Right, okay, thank you. Keep going, Sharon. How many more slides have you got? Okay.
So some of the things that, again, to consider that we're putting forward is obviously the concept plan for the Southern Sporting Precinct, Reed Reserve Playground, which is an upgrade, the netball court upgrade, waterproofing, Gawler investigations, and the asset management plan. Same scenario with obviously our buildings. So our buildings talks about structures as well. So like the swimming centre is actually considered as part of our building assets. This asset management plan is currently being reviewed at this point in time. So we're still currently working off an old asset management plan. So from that perspective, the budget bids, obviously, with regard to that's far in excess of the current asset management plan forecast. That does include a project for the Gawler club rooms, some club room upgrade, which is dependent on Gawler Centrals,
Yeah.
which is dependent on grant funding. So, but it's in the bid budget. So obviously, but it will only go ahead if there's grant funding. Pretty much the same sort of challenges in the area that we need to actually consideration in obviously the population growth, climate change. And also, I suppose the other thing with regard to buildings is our legislative compliance, making sure that our buildings do comply with the legislation from a building code, occupational health and safety, accessibility. And because you're going through the projects later, I won't go through that. Just in relation to the notice of motion, so this is specifically, and there is a listing there that the second document that basically provides the forward planning for our transport and curbs and lists basically the roads that we're actually going to do it. So from our asset management plan, again, this will be renewed because obviously we're doing the asset conditional audit as well. So this is based on the 2018 condition assessment. So that's pretty much how much we're spending at this point in time. So we spend around about 400,000 on renewal, 350 to 400,000 on footpaths, and predominantly the new footpath is converting the unformed footpaths to formed footpaths. And then again with the curb and gutter renewal and the new stuff, that's pretty much linked as well with the road reseal program as well. So because it actually from an efficiency perspective, it's actually better to do those works together. So I won't go through that detail. So that's just basically what's in there. You've got a list of what roads are on the current program. However, just be aware that potentially that is actually subject to change. And just in relation to from a budget perspective, so does anyone have any other questions on from an asset management planning perspective before I move on? Sorry.
Just, so you just said then that it's subject to change, the footpath and can you give us a bit of detail as to what would cause a change to this listing, please? Wendy.
Thank you. That's a very good question, Councillor Hennessy. So let's say when we did a condition order in 2018, the footpath on First Street was rated as a condition 2, good condition, you know, minimal cracking, minimal lifting. But then when we go out and do it in a couple of months' time, we discover that there's been major cracks form, there's sections that have lifted heavily, and all of a sudden it's got a rating of 4 or 5. That would then raise it in its priority order from where it's at in 2018, because under the best guidelines, we don't want to leave a footpath that's got cracking and raised sections, which obviously are public safety hazards. So it's that type of thing. It might also be the example that Cody raised earlier where, one of our roads was looking really good in 2018, but over the series of, many months of poor weather, a lot of potholes have opened up and now it's crocodile cracking, and really the only thing we can do is now reseal it to maintain it so that we don't have to do a full road reconstruction before the end of that road's life. So that's the way it works. Yeah.
Did you have a question, Cody?
So just back on the buildings page. I just noted the percentage of our building assets that were rated as fair to poor was up at 60%, which seemed much higher in proportion compared to the others. Is that partially, because it's 2013 before the renewal of the Civic Centre, for example, so I'm not sure how up to date it is, but I guess, do you have any further commentary around?
Aren't we reviewing this document? Yeah. Currently doing it now. Yeah. So it might change. Yeah. 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 Deputy Mayor?
Two, and you might not be able to answer this one just off the top of your head, but 401k on new footpaths is on average what we're going for leading forward. How many meters does that give us? Which you can take on notice.
Do you want the new ones or the renewal?
No, so I'm just picking the one just as an example, and it will probably be a theme that we go through when we run through the budget. Secondly, on the building one, we listed PV systems as a part of our building and construction sort of budget, which I completely agree with, but we do PV systems to try to offset expenses in electricity costs and all that sort of stuff, right? So when do we start seeing those benefits of that investment come back through the budget process?
Subject to electricity tariff prices increasing, you would expect it to pretty much happen straight away. So like, for example, while because of the tariff increase in that we're experiencing at the moment, while we would have the benefit from a budgeting perspective, you won't necessarily see so much because of the LED program, because the increase in the tariff, but pretty much you would see that as soon as the installation and it's operational, there should be some immediate transfer, as long as there hasn't been any obviously increase in the electricity tariff going at the same time, which is what's happened to coincide with the LED program as well.
So Sharon, thank you. Are you finished your presentation?
I can be. I was just going to give a quick couple more, just a couple more pages, just to sort of give a high level position of where we're at with the budget from a total perspective.
Yep.
So and all that. So I am cognizant of the time. So just in relation to just referring back to this picture that I presented just before Christmas. So we're actually talking about this side of the budget. So we're going to talk about the recurrent budget in a couple of weeks. So in relation to the initiatives budget, so this actually does impact effectively is rated by funding rates. Just sort of a bit of an indication. So 1% rate revenue equates to $257,000 based on our current rate revenue. Our long-term financial plan provides for $375,000 of new initiative spent, with 125 of that was actually for the boundary reform. And this is pretty much just to give you an indication of what's been approved in past budgets as well. So that's just basically for new initiatives. Currently, as it is currently now, we're sitting at 1.134 million. Staff have gone through it multiple times with the view to actually reduce, I suppose, the value of those initiatives that are being presented. And that will be presented to the council for consideration at a council meeting in a few weeks' time or end of March. So, you know, so we have had lots of discussions on it, and I suppose what's probably going to be presented and what's in these lists have been considered that essentially it's either stuff that we actually need to do from where we're at this point in time. So that's not all of them. That's just basically some of the key ones. There are some council member submissions that have been presented as well, which is around about 110,000, which actually will impact from an operating initiatives perspective. New positions. So the long-term financial plan provides for new, 2 new FTEs. However, there has been 4 presented. 2 of those positions will be partially funded by external income through grants or contributions because of the programs that they're going to be delivered on. And then with regard to the whole of life, which is renewal program, the long-term financial plan is 6 million. The draft budget as contained in these new is 7.4 versus 6.1. So that's all I'll do.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
And all that
Karen.
sort of stuff. So I'll hand it over to you, Karen, and you can.
Thank you. So now we're going to look at this document. Okay, that big A3 document. And I'm going to start on page 1, which is the front page. And we have a series of projects. Any questions around starting at the top? Be good if we had sort of a bit of a chronological sort of pick, perhaps not at the bottom, but at the top. Anybody got something in the top half? Yeah, Nathan.
Yeah, I've got a few, and it'll be a common theme that I pick on, so I won't just repeat myself per item, and I'll make a point on when those come up. But just on the first one, what we're saying here is we're expecting the project to be delivered over 2 financial years, the Pioneer Park wall. Yeah. Yes. I guess just a comment on that. I think we're probably going to get a fair bit of flack on that. I'm not saying that you're not trying your hardest on it, but I'm just saying, yeah, prepare ourselves for that. Then also borrowings and other fundings here. So project expenditure, the 200 grand. We don't have any future project delivery expenditure in that same column. I would expect 200 and 200 to be the total 400, or am I reading that wrong? Or is it 100 per year?
That's the first time I've seen it. I haven't been briefed on how much it's been costed. Clearly staff have the information and they've put it in this document. So I'm assuming it's going to cost $400,000. Is that correct? I don't want a long explanation, Wendy, because we really need to get through some budget bids tonight and there might be some questions.
No worries. So we still don't have any formal costing, but we're aware that this is a project that's going to need to be done. So this is honestly the best guess I have at this point based on some really preliminary information. So you will see the full costing of the options that we're assessing, hopefully in a report to council in March.
So just on that, and I'm really keen to know, we've got $400,000. Total project cost is $400,000 with 200 in this financial 222-223. Has it been? Is there design works being done? So
the design is currently underway, and that was what will inform a costing that will come to council, hopefully at the March meeting. And that'll obviously be subject to council's decision on which day they want to proceed with the wall restoration. My view is based on previous conversations that we would want to, make sure the wall restoration works commenced as quickly as possible. Thus, there's an assumption in this that we would be starting the work in this financial year, subject to an approved budget review process, and that the works would then be completed, early in the next financial year.
When did we put the artificial wall up? When did that first go up?
In November last year.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you, Nathan. I don't want to see it over 2 years because that's a long time to be working on a wall. I mean, it's an important wall. My view is that, if we don't do it, I think that's not acceptable. But and you've got the McKinlay Monument incorporated in that. So it's a highly visible wall, yeah. We're not here to make a decision about this tonight. It will come up at a future council report. Yeah, it's, we knew it was going to cost a fair bit of money, because it's not, these things aren't cheap. We want it done properly, and we want it done so it doesn't fall down again. And if we pull it down, I think that would be a tragedy. Because if we pull it down, the McKinley Monument probably won't stay standing. Anyway, Councillor Davies.
So well, firstly, on this one, the reason that it's over 2 years, is that entirely because, like, is there an aspect to this that, oh, well, we don't think we could fit 400,000 into this year's budget, or is it going to be 2 years regardless of whether we put 400,000 into it or not?
I think what this says is it's $200,000 over 2 years, which makes 400. That's my reading of it. Yeah.
Yeah, the intent is to try and get it down as quickly as possible, subject to council endorsing the budget to have it done, be it 400 or be it another number, which I'll give to you when I have it. I guess it was just important. At the moment, this doesn't sit in any budget line. So as when we're going through our budget bid processes, this seemed like a time where we could at least put it in and have it included as, you know, part of the financial considerations of council.
Yeah. So we might move on. You had some more questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to hand over or whatever, but just working down. The Williston Cemetery Action Plan draft, which I don't disagree that this is necessary work, great work for it. My question is, this is a strategic document that is in draft presently, yet we're doing actions from it.
Yeah, that's right. We're actually working off 2 documents. So we've got the 2003 document, which Heritage SA acknowledge is the endorsed document.
Yeah.
And that's 20 years old. And we've got a draft document that went through a process in, I think, 2016. There were a number of actions as part of a resolution to act on certain aspects of that draft plan, and council endorsed that.
Of those particular actions.
Yeah, like stormwater, like paving, etc. So it's not ideal.
Yeah.
I think it's messy, and I think it creates confusion, not only for staff and Heritage SA, but also the community. And people who want to have burials are getting caught up in a bureaucratic nightmare with these 2 documents, and there is confusion out there. And there is going to be a meeting, I believe, soon with the relevant parties to start to hopefully get some headway in that space. But yeah, I completely agree with you. There's 2 documents, 2003 and 2000, and the draft.
Which I mean, they're both noted here as drafts. And I mean, my overarching question there is, I mean, you've listed off the strategic documents yourself personally tonight that we have endorsed, but then we've got these draft ones running through.
The 2016 document never came back to get endorsed.
Which that's sort of the point. Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah.
That's the
Sorry.
point.
It's got no status. Yeah, that's sort of my point.
It's got no status.
Just do. Okay.
Yeah, so the action, if that stayed in the budget, for example, we chose to leave it in the budget, I would expect that we would get an endorsed plan, not a draft plan. Currently, we have a draft plan and a 2003 plan, and the 2003 plan is the endorsed plan, is the plan that Heritage SA use. And that's because it's endorsed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's approved. Councillor Hennessy. Hang on.
Just for clarification, maybe Deputy Mayor is querying why we're doing some capital works from a draft plan. Is that your question? The reason is, from my understanding of it and having some close association is that the thing that held up the draft one was to do with significance. And in fact, most of the operational material, decisions were, and I'm going to say verified, but I'm not quite sure of how exactly it worked. So the capital works has progressed in that area over a long period of time. And this is just starting to get to some of the other material that the community has been asking for now for 10, 15 years.
So the significant graves is a point of contention, and hopefully that will be clarified and I guess made certain, hopefully with this new, if it stays in the budget. Yeah, so there has been some real complexities around it. With the 216 plan, there were items in the resolution that said that staff could proceed with certain operational matters, and that was made very clear in that resolution. If you look at the IES agenda, business arising, it's in there. Yeah. Okay, any other questions, Councillor Davies and then Councillor White?
So just about the structure of this document, I guess the funded by section, I think grant funding is fairly self-explanatory, but you know, like on this first page, for example, most things are listed under borrowings and other funding, and there's one thing listed under rate revenue. Is this something that I guess as councillors we should be, there's meaning to us sort of keeping track of that? Like what's the point of distinction there?
Who's going to answer that question? Right, thank you.
And so effectively, borrowings and other fundings as normally would be used as, that is actually considered as part of the upgrade or new assets. So effectively where anything that's in the rate revenue is actually we're replacing an existing asset. So that would actually be funded through depreciation. Effectively, we would have had depreciation that we would have been charged against that asset. So over the years, we've effectively accumulated the funds to actually pay for the replacement of that asset. So that's where it's actually, this is just to sort of sit there and say how much funding source. So if you actually, when you actually go back to the
No, we're staying on the front page. We're staying on the front page. Sorry.
When you go to the total pay, when the total will make sense and will balance back to those figures that I actually showed you earlier.
Thank you, Councillor White.
Thanks, Mayor. The point about the Springwood Development Council contribution to Carlton Road infrastructure upgrades.
Now, hang on, where are you?
About
2.1.5.
that's the one.
Yep.
I assume this is talking about council contributing to the redevelopment of the new link road down Carlton Road to Cheek Avenue, and then across Cheek Avenue, that zone of road between Cheek Avenue and the roundabout. I remember a few months ago, we talked about, something came up about when the master plan about extending the bypass or the link road through Concordia and around like long-term plan. And there was discussion about whether this should be along Sunnydale Drive or Cheek Avenue. And I remember someone said, we're not going to make this decision now. This is for a future council meeting.
Yeah.
This sounds like it's already been decided that that's the way the road will go.
Carlton Road, this is actually a Carlton Road infrastructure upgrade. So Carlton Road needs to be upgraded. I actually thought the developer was going to pay for Carlton Road. Sam Delina said before he left the developer was going to pay for Carlton Road. Has that changed, Andrew? If you could turn your...
There's a range of interventions required in Gawler East, which is set out in the 2017 agreement between council, Springwood, other future developers, and there's several of them in the southern end towards Potts Road, One Tree Hill area, and also the Commissioner of Highways, who of course won't develop, they'll sell to other private landowners. So there's a mixture of funding sources. Sometimes council contributes 10, 15% towards a roundabout, at Springwood 65%. There's a mixture of other sources. My memory of Carlton Road upgrade, Cheek Avenue reconstruction, which is about 2.5 million, that was us?
So with the Carlton Road upgrade, this is part of the payments that developers are making.
Correct.
And so,
Special rate.
this is using that money,
Yep.
developer contributions, i.e. Springwood and other parties, and I don't think the Minister for Highways pays
The
anything.
Commissioner of Highways will sell their land to a private developer. They become other future developers in
Yeah.
that scenario.
So there's been a lot of work done on road interventions because of the impact of lots more people living there. And so they came up with various actions that needed to occur. So developer contributions is paying for this. Is that correct?
Not entirely. So there is a contribution that council makes. So back in the day,
Yeah.
through 2018 and 19, we put money towards Potts Road upgrade, for example. That was a precondition of the East Link Road being built, but the government paid 55 million, for example. And then Springwood paid 4 or 5 million. There was a mixture of sources throughout. So
Yeah.
it's a bit hard to sort of on the fly
Yeah.
give specifics, but that's how it worked.
Yeah. So how much of this is developer contributions, or aren't you able to say currently?
I haven't got the spreadsheet in front of me.
Okay, so you maybe take that on notice?
Yes, I will. I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So we might take that on notice and you can get that back. So does that make sense?
Yeah, so the question went on notice, is that going to, so is the 545,000 all Gawler Council, or is part of that be funding by the developer? Is that the
Part
question?
of it is funded by the developer, and Andrew will clarify what
gonna-
council's contribution will
Gotcha.
be.
Gotcha. And that has already been agreed with council and the developer.
Yes.
That was agreed that stretch of road had to be, so
Yes.
that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the long-term plan of the bypass. It's just that road to Cheek Avenue
Yeah,
needs
it's
to be.
time, it's time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's all right, all
Yeah.
good. So we'll get back about the percentage of that.
Yeah, he will.
Cool, well,
And he'll
thank you.
share that with everybody.
Yeah, fantastic, thank you.
Andrew. Thank you, Ethan. Any other questions on page one? Shall we move to page two? No? Keep going. Yep, no worries.
Sorry, Mayor, $33 million budget. I've got a couple of questions. So this one will be a general one for the infrastructure. On line item, second one from the bottom, 2.1.5,
Yep.
it talks about Cutler Road, stage one. What I like about this, 840 long, well, it says Ling, but it's supposed to be long, and 7 meters wide allows an easy calculation. And I've got that down to $15 a square meter. You know, that's what I love. And I've been raising it most years in that, because if I can turn around and break it down to how many meters of footpaths we're providing and speak that language, pretty much all those other items above was the same notes that I had it.
Yeah.
In priority order, extent to be refined pending procurement. Yeah, no, I'm not sure what that note means. So that's me on page one.
Okay, so we're going to move to page two now. Any questions from anyone on page two? Councillor Davies?
Yeah, well, so it's about the street lighting program. Also, just as a comment, I think it would be helpful to have an actual, previously we've had, numbers or a reference, because people say 2.1.5, but that's just everything on this
Well,
page. Is
everything is 2.1.5.
because that's just which part of the community plan we're
Yeah.
addressing. There's
Yeah.
no like A177,
Yeah, we used to have it really easy to find with a number that you could find.
Yeah, because you just sort of, when we're referencing it, we just sort of have to say
Where
near
have
the
they
bottom of the
gone?
page or.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's really hard to find. I don't know what you're talking about. If you're going 2.1.5, I can't find it because it's all 2.1.5. And we used to have numbers like a code. And you could go to the code and you go, that's what he's talking about. Awesome. And you name it. And it was just so easy to find. I don't know, I can't hear what you're saying. Yeah, Yeah, we used to have them, but they were, we got them right at the beginning. We've always had them. Yeah. No, it's nobody's fault. No, it's not. No, it's not anyone's fault. I think we don't want to put any blame to anyone because this is really a big body of work, Sharon, and you're doing a very good job. So don't think that we're picking on people. We're not. We're just, it's just easier to find. Yeah.
So, yeah, well, so my actual question was around the street lighting program. So,
Where's that?
third from the bottom. 2.1.5. New street lighting program.
Now, hang on a minute. That's not third from the bottom.
Yeah, it's third from the bottom on my version of the document. It's
got
gonna be tricky.
improve, mine says improve bus stop facilities program.
Well, we have different documents that are at different points in the page, so we're not going to be able to keep track at all of what's on what page. Because it's third from the bottom on mine.
Why have I got an old document? No, I'm on page 2. I'm on page 2, not 3.
I'm on page 2 and it's there. Yeah.
Oh, have we got different documents? Why have we got different documents? Well, they are. Mine's completely different. All right. I've got 2 of 12. Well, why have we got 2 different documents? I'm sorry, it's just a bit confusing. I brought my document from home and I thought that was the one we were using. No, it's not. It's not the same. Okay, new street lighting program, third from the bottom, right. What was your question, councillor?
Oh, it's just a simple one about, this is all up to date with, I guess, because we're changing all of our lights to LED. Is this going to be, are we making new LED lights?
I thought we'd finished this project. I can't see you. I'm sorry. I'm looking over here, so I actually don't see you at all. Sorry. What would you like to say, Wendy?
I will say, so this has nothing to do with the LED light conversion at all. Instead, this is a budget line that allows council to put in brand new lights, street lights, where there's need for them usually in existing older parts of the town. So we get numerous requests in over the course of any year requesting additional lighting. Each of those is assessed, and where there's merit and it works in with all the regulations, this provides us a budget to actually put in additional street lighting. Like I can give you a great example.
So we went out and said to the community that we'd finished that project. So is it finished or not finished?
It's completely different to the LED light conversion. These are brand new lights. So I can give you a good example. So when you drive along James Street, for example, at night, it's really dark. There are a lot fewer street lights on James Street than there are on many other urban streets. So we get requests in to look at the lighting on James Street. This budget line actually gives us a budget to put in a new street light where it's warranted.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. Does that make sense, councillor Davies? Yeah. Councillor Koch?
Looking at the one below that, it's the public toilets at Dead Man's Pass. Will that new toilet be able to, will the doors be able to be opened automatically like the ones in Julian Terrace? And will we be retrofitting the other toilets so we can use automatic opening and closing?
Okay, so in regard to the Dead Man's Pass toilets, that will be a knockdown and start again project. And yes, the intent is for any new toilets to have the automatic locking. It does make it easier on a number of levels. This budget doesn't include retrofitting existing toilet blocks to have the automatic locking. I know you've asked questions about that previously, so I'll provide some advice back in writing about that.
Any other questions on page 2 of 11? So it's actually completely different, isn't it? Okay. Yeah, Ethan?
Thanks, Mayor. Above the new street lighting program, just the Capital Works Engineering Design Program, there's not a lot of information there. Would I be able to, we'd just have a quick 30-second crash course on what that is?
So you're looking at Transport Asset Management Plan 222, Capital Works Engineering Design Program. Prepare engineering designs for 24-25 whole of life infrastructure works program, 300,000.
I think the easiest way to answer that without taking up everyone's time is for me to actually to provide a list of what those investigations are in writing. Look, over the course of many years, there are lots of different projects that are raised through CRMs and through our knowledge of what comes through our asset management plan, needing renewal or upgrade. This budget allows us to do detailed design for about 10 different projects, which allows us to then be prepared to put up a capital bid for the next financial year.
So when the next iteration of this document comes about, we'll have a dot point. We'll have dot points so that it makes it a little bit clearer. Thank you. And if you can share that with those other ideas, Councillor Hennessy.
Thank you, Mayor. If you'll forgive me, I'd like to therefore go back to page 1 and I'd like some more details, please, on the call centre software for customer service. In theory, I think that's great. I just need to understand exactly what we're getting.
So that's
50,000.
fourth from the top.
That's the fourth from the top, call centre software for customer service. Yeah, I'd just like a bit more detail,
Do
please.
you want both of them or do you just that one, call centre software, just that one?
For me, myself, yes.
Just that one?
Just that
Okay.
one, thank you.
Okay, so some more information and maybe some dot points to clarify. Thank you. That would be great. Any other, so we're going to go back to page 2. Any other questions on page 2? Yes, Nathan.
So I'm, is this the same? So on mine, it's the Disability Access Program, which,
Yep.
yeah, you got that on the other one?
Yeah,
So it's the top of the page of mine where my notes is, but I just know that's, 23,400 each for some pram ramps, etc. I'm just trying to get some clarification around that. It seems heavy.
So hang
how
on,
that
you're
works.
looking at the improved bus stop facilities or you're looking at something else?
That was another one that I had a note on, but I'm looking at Disability Action and Inclusion Plan, Disability Access Program, Improved Disability Access at road intersections and community facilities with the installation of pram ramps across the town. And then it goes through Carlton Road, Julian Terrace, Murray Street, Carlton Road roundabout, which I appreciate.
It's not on either of these. Why have we got hard copies? when
Yeah,
they're not-
117, yeah,
it's
so,
not
yeah, the
correct.
23.4 each.
So we've got 2 different documents circulating here and I'm just trying to work out which one we're looking at. So we've got, yeah, okay, that's fine. Disability Access Program, which was mine on the top.
But you're-
Where is it on the, what
So you're
other
to
people have
bottom.
got?
So it looks like
2
it's
of
on
11?
no, it's, isn't it one of 11, the bottom of 1 of 11, yeah.
All right, look, we really need to have all the same documents.
The 11, yeah, I think she does, yeah. So yeah, so it's on the bottom of 1 of 11, or it's on the top of 2 of 12. You choose one of those 2. It's the same one.
Okay.
So
So Disability Access Program, and you've got Carlton Road, Julian Terrace,
that's the one.
Murray
Yep,
Street, Carlton Road roundabout.
that's the one.
Okay, DDA upgrade.
Yep. So my notes there are, I love how it says Carlton Road, Julian Terrace, and it really locates that work.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
thank you for that. And then when I turn around and go, okay, if I divide those by those projects, I was getting 23,500 each. I mean, admittedly, I was doing this at midnight last night, so my math might have been slightly off, but just to me, those ramps just seemed a little bit rich. That was all.
Okay, you were just making comments? Okay, thank you. Any other questions on page 2? Any other questions on page 2? No? I'm going to go to page 3. And I'm going to go to page 3 on both of the documents. This is really confusing. All right. I'm going to stick with this 3 of 11. Any questions on page 3? Did somebody say yes? Yep.
So this will be, again, a general one, but we're looking at transfer, so deliver the 2023 Transport Asset Renewal Program as per the Transfer Asset Management Plan. And the Transport Asset Management Plan, it was endorsed in 2022. Now, this is a $2.544 million spend, which is a road seal program. We're getting some funding, you know, that's all good. But why, I guess, this particular,
So you might be better to look up on the screen because we're following on the screen, because I don't know if you've got it on your sheet. 'Cause it's
Yeah,
not-
I
it's not-
do.
It's not on 3 of 11.
yeah, I do. The only thing that's not on the screen is my notes next to those items.
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
keep talking, Nathan, and people can look at that.
Yeah.
It might
So-
be easier.
So the general question for that is just why this particular strategy or this particular delivery over some of the other works that are needed. And that's my notes there, which I also appreciate some of the commentary before leading into this, which did half answer that. So yeah, just a bit of clarity, I guess, around that.
That would be good. So if we could take that on notice, if you could take that on notice, Wendy, thank you. And we can share that. How quickly do you think you could get that to us? Very quickly.
On the hub, there's actually a tab that is the Renewal Works program, and that lists out all the different elements of those programs. It doesn't
Okay.
itemize the cost for each, but it actually gives you the list of what
Okay.
assets are included in that. And I can easily break down that cost into roads, curbs and footpaths.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on page 3? Yep.
So just on Works Depot improvements,
Okay, where's that?
so, well, for me, it's 3rd from the bottom on page 3 of 11.
Yep,
So is this something that's going to be, because we had a tour, or the previous council had a tour of the depot, it seems like there's a lot to be fixed there, like, to what extent does this cover the issues with the infrastructure of the depot?
oh, we're not gonna, I think we'll take that on notice and get a proper detailed answer. Yeah, I think, because that's quite a detailed, because it's only 90,000, it's not a lot of money. So I don't see that there's going to be a lot. Rubble storage, relocation of rubble storage, safe entry, exit into depot site. I mean, I think when we do our site tours, I think this will help us understand some of these items, or hopefully. So Wendy, if you are able to maybe put a little bit, I think it's got some good information in here, but just, yeah, further clarify, that would be lovely. Any other questions? Yes, Nathan.
So I'm on 3 of 12, which is
Yep.
second, so 3rd down on 3 of 11, heavy fleet 10-year replacement program. A point that I flagged previously, but I'll reflag it. So we are replacing 2 tractors, which we're predicting will cost around $190,000, which, given how,
Where are we? Sorry,
No,
replace
so-
5 vehicles. Okay, so that's not,
heavy fleet, yeah, so
where,
heavy fleet 10-year replacement program, replace 2 tractors. So
I
either,
can't see it. Oh, replace 2 tractors. I've got it now.
Yeah.
190 grand.
Yeah, $190,000. And I have no argument that they probably need doing and
Yeah.
10-year replacement, do a
Yeah.
lot of work around the place.
Yeah.
Do we then sell them secondhand? And then what about the offset? When do we see that offset come through? Because obviously that 190,000 should be lower because of the offset of the sale of
Will
the,
you be selling them? Yes?
Yes.
That's a yes?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right, excellent. Any other questions on page 3?
So- Oh, sorry, but how do we see the offset? When do we see the saving come back on that?
So-
I'm sorry, but
Yeah,
you're
yeah, no,
so
no, no,
far
that's fine. Yeah,
apart, I
that's
can't
fine.
see or hear you.
That's fine. So effectively, normally what we would actually do is trade in. So basically on acquisition of the actual new asset, or the new truck, a tractor, we'll actually see that immediately. So in relation to, and I can't find it on the screen here, but if you actually go down for the light fleet replacement, yes, it's 190, and then in the funding column, effectively, you'll see that there should be on the,
Is that over
there
the
should be a 40
page?
grand, which is the $20,000.
Is that over the page? I think it's over the page, isn't it?
Yeah. So for a trade-in, so that's basically effectively it's the trade-in value or the sale cost of when we actually sell, when we purchase it. So we'll get it instantaneously once the asset's been purchased.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to move to page 4 now. Oh, yes.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. I just want to highlight the fact that the Civic Centre acoustic treatments upgrade is a welcome addition. I think that will please a large proportion of the community that come to performances in this building. So thank you.
Okay, good. We're going over to page 4. Both of them. Not funny, Henry. It's really quite confusing. Okay. Okay, any questions? Councillor Kosh. Yeah. So which one, are you
I'm on
working off
page
4 of 11?
4 of
or
11,
which
4 of 11.
Okay.
The first one is the hydrovac. How often do we actually need the hydrovac? Because street sweepers actually provide the same service, for cleaning outside entry pits, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just wondering why we all of a sudden need a hydrovac.
Nice and quickly. So we think there's a 2-year payback period on this. We actually use hydrovac services a lot, and we're using it not so much just for like cleaning up the side entry pits and that type of thing. We're actually using it as part of our site investigation. So when we're laying out sections of footpath or renewing curb, we're actually going out and making sure we're not hitting tree roots. So it's part of our, I guess, our tree protection mechanism. So the calculations the guys at the depot did was a 2-year payback period. And also it means we've got it to access it straight away rather than being at the mercy of contractors.
The open space management plan, the Ailing and Dyer Lime Kiln Park, and it's 40,000 to do a plan. Haven't we got an in-house landscape designer?
We do have a landscape coordinator who is a landscape architect. I mean, her speciality is certainly not sports and sports centre spaces. I guess the Elliott Goodger is a combination of spaces. I'll take that as a point that maybe there is a way of doing some delivery internally. I think traditionally we have done these plans via an external consultant though.
Immerford Grove redevelopment, I think that was designed in-house and that was seen as a saving. I would have, yes, that was my comment there. The last one is the light fleet replacement.
10-year replacement.
Your 10-year
program.
replacement, and there's
Yeah.
5 vehicles. Will that be contingent on the workforce strategy review? Because we might need different types of vehicles depending on what we decide with the work.
Are they going to be electric vehicles or what?
Petrol.
They're going to be petrol.
probably.
Are we just going to replace petrol? I thought we were going to electric.
Well, I mean, my question is that, when we do the workforce strategy review, potentially we may need different types of vehicles depending on which person, you know, which officer is doing certain roles. So I'm just wondering whether that has been taken into account.
I mean, so there's a fleet renewal program that this is based off of. We've got vehicles that are ending the end of, you know, the mileage that we replaced them at, or the number of years that we replaced them at, whichever is first. You know, when we make the assessment of what vehicles we're actually procuring, we'll obviously put a lens over that of any changes we've got in the structure of the town services and what the actual need in the business is. Where we can, we're going for, obviously for hybrid vehicles wherever that's
So
appropriate and
you're going to get
available.
hybrid, not fully electric.
We've got the transition to the electric vehicles going on in the background as well. I think at the moment, the problem is that we're looking at a 2-year wait for every electric vehicle. And so when we've got vehicles that are, you know, due for replacement, we're looking at alternatives, you know, the best environmental alternative where we can.
So they'll be hybrids. Right. Okay, thank you. Any other questions on page 4? Councillor Davies.
So a couple of questions. The first one's on the Gawler Oval Change Room project delivery. It mentions the project is dependent on receipt of grant funding. When are we likely to have confirmation on the receipt of the grant funding?
So we're in the process of doing the design work for that sports club upgrade at the moment, obviously in consultation with the Gawler Central Sporting Association. The idea is that the grants that are appropriate to that type of project will open, I believe it's around August, September. So we'll put in a grant submission in line with the I think it's an ORSA grant. And we'll know by the end of the calendar year what the status of that grant is. I believe that's the timing. Now, if David Barrett was here, I'm sure he could answer that with more definitive timing, but that's my understanding based on previous grants that I've been involved in.
Councillor Sample.
Yes, Sport and Aquatic Centre CCTV upgrade. My question is, who monitors those cameras? To spend 90,000, I've got 15 of them up at my property and I monitor them myself by my telephone. Who monitors those at the Aquatic Centre if there's a problem? And the cost of 90,000 seems to be well over the top. Can somebody answer that?
I'll respond to that. So this will be effectively an extension to our CCTV system, which the recordings occur where there's an incident. We then go back to the time accordingly, and then we engage with the police. So that's how we don't have a staff member sitting in front of the terminal just looking at a screen waiting for something to happen. It's when something does happen, then we go back and then we find the footage and then we engage with the police. There has been an increase in sort of antisocial activities at the pool. And our CCTV system isn't up to scratch, and it's not just about the cameras themselves, but all the power that needs to be provided. And I understand it's also some software upgrades that we also need.
Okay,
The
thank
same
you.
question that I asked about them.
Yeah, I was just going to add that's also effectively the back-end server. Because of our requirements from a state's records perspective, we have to actually retain that footage for a period of time. So we actually have to also increase our storage capacity to actually maintain those.
So
as well.
that's
So it's
incorporated.
it's not just basically the TV, the CCTV cameras. It's actually also the hardware and infrastructure to actually support the retention of that that footage as well for a period of time that we're required to do it from the State Records Act.
Thank you. All right, how are we going? Nathan?
Yeah, just noticing some of these items, you know, we talked about it before, renew street and open space furniture, fittings and equipment. which are unserviceable, $50,000. Obviously, it'd be great to understand what that $50,000 covers in the way.
Itemised.
Yeah,
You'd
and
like an itemised thing like
that's,
that?
that's
Yeah.
right. And it is happening through some of the other items. It'd just be good to have
Yeah.
that consistency throughout,
Sure.
because what that promotes is
Yeah.
the ability to be able to take that all in. And also to councillor Koch's point around the cars, is there any scope to, if electric cars are 2 years away, is there any scope to look at and reassess some of the cars that may be due for replacement because they've hit that 10-year threshold? However, realistically, they might be able to last that extra year
Yeah.
to allow.
I think it'd actually be really good to get fully electric rather than hybrid, because hybrid cars aren't as efficient. You've got double the weight, and they're just not as efficient. You know more about this than me, but electric cars are just so much more efficient. We save an enormous amount of money on purely on petrol.
Yeah. That's right. And I guess the question around that is how rigid is our policy that says, oh, 10 years is here. Even if we've got a car that's done 20,000 kilometres in 10 years, which I doubt we would, but you know what I mean? You would then, yeah,
I think my
rotate it
car
out
was
because
like
the
that.
policy.
My car was like that, I think.
Well, yeah.
Well, I bought
My
my own
work
car
use-
now. I
My
bought my own
work here certainly aren't,
Yeah.
and our supervisors don't look after them, so it wouldn't work for us, but you know.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that if you could stretch it out for another 12 months and then maybe get fully electric rather than a hybrid, because a hybrid car, you use petrol and a little bit of electricity. You don't actually use a lot of electricity.
And yeah, and it's just a question around what's the trigger point? Because if the trigger point is the 10 years and then that's what it is, or it's the kilometres, then what's the benefits of going, do we wait another 12 months? And what's the offset
Yeah.
apparent we could get?
I think it's a really good point, councillor Koch.
Just on electric cars, a bit of a fun fact, it costs us about $4 a week to run each of our cars in energy.
We'd save a fortune with fully electric rather than hybrids. Hybrids just aren't worth the money, I don't think. But anyway, that's just my personal opinion. Okay. Any other questions on this particular? Oh, yes. Ethan?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just running through a few quickly. The Reed Reserve Play Space, that's going to be entirely funded by the state government. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, fantastic. The down to Gawler Oval change room project delivery.
Mhm.
Oh no, sorry, we already addressed that. Apologies. Next one, Southern Sporting Precinct concept.
Yeah.
It says in the comments that is this limited to the rehoming of Gawler South football? If not, consider deferring for 12 months. Do we know when? Is there a little bit more information on this? And do we know if South Gawler, do they have a deadline to make a decision, or is there
No.
any more information on that?
Well, not as far as I'm aware. And I think this is concept plans, because I think we've seen some pictures in the southern urban areas, but it really depends on state government, etc. And there's nothing concrete at the moment. Yeah, these are just concepts, so that if and when there might be something to talk about, you can actually jump straight in. Yeah.
So the existing concept there, this is more detailed, is that correct? Is this more of a detailed plan that then can be talked about in future? I guess I was just wondering about, so is it saying if South Gawler aren't willing to come on board, it's not gonna happen, or yeah, that's what that comment sounds like. I'm just wondering.
No,
it's
no,
not
I
necessarily.
think South Gawler are very keen to move, but I think the identified area hasn't been chosen yet. So there needs to be more discussion around different parties, but getting a concept would be quite useful, because once you get a concept, you've got that in place, you can then go, for example, state government, and go, here, this is what we're planning, this is our vision, etc., with the collaboration of South Gawler Football Club. But yeah, you can't have nothing to show them.
I understand that. That makes sense. Thank you. Maybe that comment, does that need to be removed then? Is it irrelevant? Yeah, okay. Thank you. And that is.
I think
everything,
these
yeah.
just notes that, yeah. They will be, I think they'll be removed, yeah. Okay, so we're going to move over to page 5. I've got 5 of 11 and 5 of 12. Oh, there's nothing on 5 of 12, but there's lots on 5 of 11. Yes.
So the Williston Cemetery Conservation and Management Plan, just from what we were talking about before, so is this approval of going out to engagement for the 2016 draft, or is this further development,
It'd be a new one,
a new one?
be a new one, yeah. Yeah, be a new one. I mean, it would build on the 2 plans that are currently in use, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think, yeah, it'd be really nice to have an approved Williston management plan, which we have in 2003, but yeah. So I think, you know, it's interesting development. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I mean, 50,000 on refurbing the 2 plans just seems a little bit heavy, but yeah, just a comment on that. But on the top line of page 5 of 11, 7,000 for a mural, I think, is that depending on where we're doing the works and everything, I feel like the murals are a little bit more expensive than that historically.
It's got S on the end of mural.
Yeah, murals, that's right, exactly, for $7,000. So I guess I'd like to, understand a bit more.
Okay.
What,
Well, yes, we can have some more detail around Sharon's madly writing, so I'm hoping she's writing those comments down, Deputy Mayor. Yep, that's great. We could get some more a little bit more. Yeah, we'll have one meeting, thanks, well, one meeting. Next.
So
Councillor Hennessy. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, and I note with Councillor Davies, yes, it does, the new plan does include, as you will see, a community engagement so that we get it right. And that links very nicely to something that obviously is close to my heart, community engagement software platform. While I'm pleased to see it, what I would like to have a bit more detail is that we're going to buy the software, but we have decided not to employ a staff person to implement, I guess, some of these strategies. So I'd like to understand who it is in the organisation who will be managing this software. Thank you. Will it be each department, Henry?
we have an officer who has overarching oversight of our community engagement programs. And I don't think that we need an additional FTE in this space because we have a sort of a model where different parts of the business take responsibility, but there is a centralised resource that already plays that role.
Is that Linda?
Yes.
That's good to hear, but as I understand, the community development officer has about 7 or 8 areas of responsibility. So we'll just watch the space to see how it goes.
I could. We do have an FTE proposer in the area of community social planner, and if that position does come to fruition, and that will allow some capacity in terms of some of the work that Linda does.
Is that sitting in the planning department?
That will be sitting in the strategy, the new strategy unit that's being formed as a consequence of the restructure.
Right. So who's in charge of that?
David Barrett,
David Barrett.
who also has community services and other parts of the business that will have, direct links and direct lines of communication.
So it's part of the strategic strategy department, Helen? Okay. I'll go to Councillor Samble.
Thank you. I just wonder, is there any, maybe David's department or what Henry just said, but the Gawler branding, I mean, this has been tried for so many years now, so I'm just wondering who's going to be designing that, who's going to be organising that to encourage investment in our town, because the investment's pretty good in our town at the moment.
So is this about a Gawler Invest brochure? Is that what it is? Or
No,
what
it's
is
got
it?
Gawler activation strategy 18 to 24, Invest Gawler Economic Development,
Development of an economic development brand
50 grand.
to encourage investment in the town. So can somebody explain what that means?
Yeah, well, that's, but David's not here. Well, that's a
So this is about the marketing of the township of Gawler for the purposes of awareness, both from a metropolitan and state perspective, to attract investment, to attract tourism, and what that branding and what that marketing promotion program should be.
So what do we get for the 50,000?
We get an engagement of a marketing professional to help us understand where we sit as a community, as an attraction point for a whole raft of investment opportunities, including tourism.
So I'm just, because it says encourage investment in the town. So you're talking about tourism or you're talking about investment? Right. Well, I'd like a little bit more information about that because I don't think that's clear enough for me. And I agree with you, Brian. I think I need a little bit more information around development of an economic development brand to encourage investment in the town. I'd like to know what we get for that. Do we get just advice? Do we get brochures? Do we get a video? Do we get what does it look like? I'm just a little bit unclear as to what that is. So if we can have a little bit more information, I think that would be.
I'm just wondering what the business development board, I mean, we've got the business development board, we've got a whole team of staff that are involved with tourism, and we've already got everything there. But to spend 50,000 on what we've got already, I'm just wondering where that 50 will be spent. So maybe.
So if we can have a bit more clarity around,
More clarity,
I'd like a little bit more clarity around that. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Davies.
So around the .id profile subscription.
Yeah.
So what kind of information, I guess, that's not currently publicly available, because, the census data is up online, for example, with all those little details about Gawler and everything. Like, what are we specifically? What's the $10,000 subscription get us?
You get a little bit more. You get some of the hidden data that's not free. It's been around for quite some time. ABS data, a lot of it's hidden. And you do get other data, but you do need to collect it and make sense of it. Yeah, and sometimes they can make sense of it for you if you pay them. Yeah, it's been around for a little while, I think. Okay. Can I keep moving? Awesome. Great. So I'm on page 6. Okay. So these are initiatives. Okay. Yep.
Thanks, Mayor. Just regarding the first one on the boundary realignment inquiry, I did ask an email yesterday, but I hadn't got a reply yet, so I might as well ask it now. The resolution that was passed in August 2022 stated that the basically council were happy are going to proceed to stage 3 as long as the costs are not over the estimation, which was about the 300,000 mark.
Yeah.
So just to clarify.
So there was an email came out from David Barrett.
Oh, did it? Oh, I might not have checked my emails today.
That it's gone up on the tender site for the Boundaries Commission. And so once they get quotes and they choose a quote, it comes back to council for a decision.
Yes. When I read the resolution, it sounded like, please correct me if I'm wrong, that council have already approved this, happy to proceed with stage 3 unless it is a blowout of cost. Is that correct?
Previous terms councils, you're not bound by previous councils' resolutions. It's a new council, so you make a new decision.
Okay, so when the tenders come back, will it come back to council on, do we proceed to stage 3? Because it just, the resolution read, council are proceeding to stage 3.
Yeah.
Here's what's
So
happening, and it was just that,
It will come back to council from the Boundaries Commission. They will get a quote and then we'll come back and we will be asked to make a decision.
sorry, yes, no. Just proceeding with stage 3, apologies, just that independent investigation by the commission
We will be asked to make a decision on proceeding,
with the investigation or with the outcome of the investigation? Okay,
not the outcome. The outcome
No,
is
is-
a matter for the Boundaries Commission.
Yes.
We don't have any
Okay.
role in an outcome, but we do have a role in how much it will cost.
okay, okay, no worries. I think that resolution, again, to me, it read that council have already agreed last year that we are
Yeah.
proceeding.
So previous councils, we're not bound.
Oh, okay,
We don't, if you have a previous council resolution, unless you agree with it, you don't have to put up a revoking motion. You can make a new motion.
okay. But if we did nothing, just say the council, we did nothing, would it just proceed as planned? No, it wouldn't. Okay.
No,
I'm just a little bit
it would
confused, that's
stop.
all. I'm a little, okay.
it
Okay,
would stop.
I'll listen and see if I can work it out. I guess I'm a bit confused because it's like a decision was made. Oh, hang on a sec, there's a new council. We're not, doesn't matter, but how does that work with all the other motions that have been put in place?
Well, in a new council, we make motions
Mhm.
that we're bound by unless we want to put up a revoking motion. Okay? If the revoking motion doesn't get up, you can't put it up again for another 12 months.
Mm.
So that's been the same on successive council terms. Previous council's motions are valid unless we change our minds.
I see. Okay, so, right, I see. So so either way, we will get, the council will be able to make a decision whether we agree with what last term and proceed with
Yes.
or change. Right, I see.
Yes.
So I think I get you now. So either way, it will still come back to council for a decision.
Yes, it will.
Even though previous council did say we're happy
Yes.
to proceed,
That's
it will still come back because it's a new council.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Sorry, I just take a bit of time to get my head around it, but thank you. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I'll go councillor Davies.
So I guess, so this is the end of the new initiatives. I guess it's a question about what's not here. The below the line staff proposals are here, but I can't find the above the line staff proposals anywhere in this document.
Below the line is,
Below the lines at the end on page 11 of 11, I guess. But the above the line ones were in that presentation, but are not in our documents.
yeah. So below the line is page 10 of 11. Starts below the line. So it's 10 of 11 and 11 of 11. Yeah. Above the line. Yeah, so we've been going, so there's one whole page, Cody, 10 of 11.
For clarity, maybe I can help, because I had exactly the same thought. We were told which staff positions are under the line, and it actually refers in one of the comments, which I will find on page. Yeah, and it actually, it eludes the fact, here it is. No, it's not. It actually, very last page, there's a statement that said, recommended FTE positions considered a higher priority. And that's against the very last one,
That's
which was
below the line.
yeah.
That's.
So it actually alludes in this that these three positions that are under the line have been judged against other positions, and
yes.
therefore I
Yeah,
think my colleague is asking, what are the other positions?
so, yeah, so they've been assessed as being below the line. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
So yes, so the above the line ones, which I've just got up on the screen, were cut off the
These
printer.
two, these.
So these are the 4 positions that are actually considered as part of above the line. So
Yeah.
sorry, I'll just increase that size.
So that's what staff have assessed.
So
as-
is
yeah.
the senior social planner, which Henry just talked about. There's also economic development officer. And then there's
Isn't that a planning position though, really? It's a strategic planning.
what?
Well, it's a strategic, well, it says strategic planning for the council's community and social infrastructure.
It's not a strategic planning from a land use development perspective. It's a community social planner. And yes, working at a strategic policy level.
So it's high level. Right, so it wouldn't really assist the community development officer, really. Well, yes, at a high level, but really, when you think about what the community development officer does, she's on the ground doing a lot of the hard yards. She's not doing the high level stuff. So how would that assist? I mean, yes, it would, you'd get strategic direction and you'd plan for council's community and social infrastructure and associated project delivery, so that they would work very closely with new developments. Is that what that would do?
Well, yes, but at the same time, where and as required from an operational perspective, they need to assist in other initiatives, they will. You know, our involvement in affordable housing, you know, that's been picked up by a number of different staff in between other priorities, which they just can't get to. So this role will have a primary function in that housing affordability space. When we do work through the growth areas and the social infrastructure outcomes that we're wanting to achieve, this role will have a primary function in that regard. So yes, they'll operate at a policy strategy level, but where and as the business needs some assistance from an operations perspective, then they'll also participate.
Right. And we've got an economic development officer. Manage business innovation hub, drive delivery of the economic development strategy and tourism plan, act as liaison with regional RDA and Gawler Business Development Group. And we've got immunisation program and development administration officer. And they're part-time, clearly, for 55,000. Is that a part-time position? It's been increased. Okay. To a full-time position, and civil trainee, Cert 3 in civil construction and plant operations for a period of 3 years. Okay. They're above the line. Yep. Yep, Nathan.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'm still on 7 of 12 or 6 of 11. So at this particular juncture, I'm sort of just running through and making general comments, asking general questions, but the time will come where we'll agree to be above the line, below the line, and you know, we'll start teasing all that out.
Yeah.
And you know, to Ethan's point, the boundary reform stuff will definitely come for a decision for us to make, but regardless of what the decision is, the justification of the spend is only ever ratified at June. So we approve the budget to approve each spend. And at that point in time, if we haven't played around with the above belows and whatever else, we're committing to whatever that spend is in its totality. And we agree with those line items as we work through. So in answer to your question, if you were worried about this going ahead regardless, there would still be an opportunity to revisit at that June around line items above and below. Now to the, I was looking at the beautification plan one, where it's $30,000, where we're talking about the next round of beautification of streetscape, et cetera, et cetera.
So what is that?
What is it?
So I'm assuming it's scoping and designing and looking at, let's take the roundabouts, for example, what that costs to figure out the scope. But then you follow that through and we're already allowing a future expenditure of $270,000 there. Now I know, I can see these round figures and I know exactly what they were. They are estimates. But I just guess, I'm just wanting a bit of clarity over the process on one, the $30,000 spend that we want this particular year to then lead to the $270,000.
So tell us what the design works are for. Can you, Wendy?
So based on the beautification plan that council has endorsed, the next main part of the beautification would be to do that southern entrance. I have to use a round figure of $30,000.
So is this just for design work?
Just for
Is that
design,
under the bridge,
yeah, leading
Right.
in and under the bridge.
Okay.
Again, as I've said in previous conversations, again, we're talking about working on DOT land.
But we've done previous design work for under the bridge. We have.
Yeah, or maybe then it's calculating some of that. I mean, I just think, I'd suggest that it's worthy having a budget line for this. Beautification is something that council has wanted to progress. I'd suggest that, a revisited conversation around what the priority for that beautification is would be required prior to this money actually being spent. And I think that would be my recommendation as a staff member.
So we've actually got concept designs for under that bridge. We've done them before. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so the scoping of it over the conceptual, I get all that. I also get the sentiment of, look, I just want something in there so we don't miss out. I get that as well, because of the appetite of the beautification plan. I also do like the idea of revisiting it with the new chamber. I think that's pretty respectful and make sure that everyone's on board with this sort of mantra that I guess this plan has. Now just moving on to the staffing bit that we're on before, the bid that's come above the line.
These positions?
Yeah, economic development officer. One of the roles there is manage the business innovation hub. Now, when we were talking about who should manage, how we should manage the business innovation hub and how it's all working, and we needed to change the model because of our last consultant or last contractor not quite working our way. We had a few options come forward, and at the time it was sold that, let's try this model, we'll keep it internal, we'll use the resources we have and see how it works. I'm reading this as, look, we need more, which was some of the fears of some of us in the chamber at the time. We need more to be able to keep that management, keep that innovation hub management system or process. And I think there was even an unsolicited bid at the time to say, well, what does it look like if we engage an external body like the Gawler Business Development Group, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess my point to that would be, if you turned around and took the innovation hub out of that, what is left in that portfolio and what FTE does that equate to? Because don't get me wrong, I think there is some merit in having some economic development at that higher level, potentially, but I would have to unpack what we already have and what the double up is and what more benefit we would have that we don't already have in our staffing base. So I know that's a very difficult question, but just some comments.
I think staff have worked up these positions, haven't you, Henry? You clearly had a role in picking these positions. Yep. Clearly, yeah.
So it's a question of timing in terms of our thinking when presenting the budget and this particular position, relative to effectively we're still in 6 months of the pilot period that we're currently in with engaging and working with the Gawler Business Development Group and the RDA, and we've had reports to council in this space. And so That's still to play out. There will be reports to CCS over the coming couple of meetings to give an update of where we're at with the operations of the hub. And we're also presenting a report to the next CCS meeting about where we're at with the status of our implementation of the economic development strategy. And to varying degrees, it will be both those conversations will be, we're doing okay, but we're struggling. And so it may well be that through those deliberations and unpacking this conversation via those reports through CCS over the next couple of months, there may be the consensus that, well, no, we're doing okay and we don't need this additional resource. My anticipation is that we want to do better. We don't want to struggle in this space. And so that's the reason why I feel it's important that I present this at this stage to see how the conversations go over the next couple of months, rather than being in May, June, and then say, look, we can't go forward in any constructive way relative to both the hub and or the economic development strategy, and at the last minute, put it on the table. So I made the judgment call that will incorporate it now, appreciating the budget's got several months to go, but also appreciating there'll be a number of conversations over the coming period relative to a number of elements in this regard.
So just on that, you know, coming into my second term now, the theme around IES items and delivery has always been, we're under it. We're struggling to keep up here. We're under it. There are big turnovers in staff, and we're trying to keep up to be able to deliver the services that we say we're going to. I think we remember where there was a capital works project budget of nearly $15 million, which I think about $7 or $8 million got delivered for a magnitude of reasons, but a lot of it was around staffing shortages, et cetera, as well. It was Councillor Kosh. Yeah, material shortages, COVID, et cetera. Yes, absolutely. But it was also about the workforce at. Okay, we can probably make this very easy. Yeah, probably make it easier. Do we sit right now in the depot? Have we got all the resources we need to service everything we do in this town?
Well, aren't we doing a depot review?
Yeah.
We're doing a depot review, yeah.
So the depot review, but we haven't done a economic review or anything like that. And the same theme comes through each budget process. The same theme comes through backlog in fundamental services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, I'm looking at an innovation hub that we're saying, you know what, we're probably going to get to the end of our business study and say we're struggling. But this is the same thing I'm hearing from the depot and the IES stuff for a while now.
Yeah, look, I'm going to throw a couple of comments in. I think that from an economic development and tourism perspective, we're not hitting the mark. We're definitely not hitting the mark. But we are spending quite a lot of money in tourism. So how do we actually rationalise that? You know, when you see these, and I think it's good that the CEO's thrown these up to us early. I think it helps us understand and reflect, go away and reflect on these positions and how we can strategically plan, for example, the social and community planner, because I haven't seen this before at all. I've had no briefings on it at all. So, yeah, I know that we're not hitting the mark with tourism. Economic development, there has been a call for council to be further involved in economic development. That's been from various quarters in the community. I hear what you're saying. The depot, I'd like to see the review come out and see how what efficiencies can be made. And, you know, they came up, I think they needed 3 or 4 positions at one point to manage. But I was interested to see that none of those positions are here this year. So I'm really keen to see the depot review and see where that goes. I think that I think we need to just go away and think about it. We don't make any decisions here tonight. But I think we have, you know, quite a lot that we can think about, you know, because there's lots of different projects that staff are putting up. And I guess we need to work collaboratively with our staff, but we also need to make hard decisions sometimes. So I guess we'll see where that goes. Thank you, Nathan. Oh, yes. What are we doing? Seven of 11. Climate emergency greening of Gawler, 200 grand. Sorry. There you
I've
go.
commented on this a number of times. This works out at $1,000 per tree. I don't know whether we're gold plating the delivery of those trees. I would like to see the actual scoping. For example, I don't know what we're doing around the planting holes, because when I looked at what was done up on the Schronberg Drive and how they prepared the holes there, that was very, very expensive. If we're replicating that for these 200 trees, I'd be very concerned. I'm also concerned about the horticultural outcomes. I'm also concerned about just trees. You're looking at 200 extra trees a year. You're not talking about you're only talking about the upper story, not the middle or the understory. And you get a monoculture and you get a change in the species of animals that you get. Basically, you end up with minor birds everywhere if you don't put in the other layers. So I'm really concerned that it's come up over and over again. It's 200,000 for 8 years. That's $1.6 million. It's a lot of money. I'm really, really concerned, and I really want to see, you know, what we're getting for our money, because I think $1,000 a tree is a lot of, it's just too much. That's my view.
Councillor Davies.
So on that, the senior community planner position, just
We'll go back to the positions, the senior social and community planner,
yeah, so just in terms of its
140 grand.
role in the organization. So is this, when we say community here, is this specifically like the library community services department? Are we talking about programs and events and youth and community? Like what does?
I think it's strategic planning, high
Sure,
level.
but that's the vaguest it could possibly be, because our community plan is our overarching document. So what is a general community planner?
Well, what I'm hearing, and I'm hearing what you're saying, because that's what I said just previously, but it wasn't really answered. But I think we probably need a little bit more clarity around some of these roles. So a little bit more clarity around the social and community planner, a little bit more clarity around the economic development officer. And I think the other two are fairly straightforward. It's fairly obvious what they're doing. But I think the two top ones, I think we probably need a little bit more clarity, and it might help us reflect and just help us make some better informed decisions when the time comes. So I think if staff can take that on board and give us some more, some examples of what the senior social and community planner, so if it's new developments, if it's high level thinking around where we take our community plan, for example, how we have done a social and community strategy a couple of years ago. It was actually quite a good document. So I'm not sure if we've ever actioned any of those elements of that document. So that might be something that this person might get their teeth into, but I think we need more clarity, and I agree with you. Yeah. And picking up what Nathan said, I think just hearing and understanding the economic development officer, and maybe looking at what other councils do in that space, it might be useful for us to see how other councils use their economic development officers, because I think it's quite useful. Yes, Andrew, been very quiet there.
Unusually for me, very quiet. I was only going to mention that I've had a similar role in previous councils, and the role is actually really valuable because what it does is allows you to look at things like utilisation, existing assets, talking to the community groups that are using those assets, talking about what's wrong with those assets. They're a really good conduit back to the asset team and to Wendy's team as to, well, this is working well, but this is not. They work with the grants team, for example, and go, well, these are the things you can improve. They may look at
Yeah.
things like rationalisation. You might have 3 halls, of which 2 are used all the time and one's just not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
And that helps council make financial decisions.
Okay.
So it's a really important role.
So I think a little bit more clarity. Thank you for that. That's fantastic. A little bit more clarity about those 2 top roles would be really useful, I think. Councillor Hennessy.
Yeah, thank you. I've also worked with social planners before, so here's a bit of a hint. I'd also like to see how they're involved in ensuring the community that is under enormous growth, how we ensure that there's some cohesiveness and opportunities for the community to meet and interact. So it's more than just assets, it's more than, that, we're actually looking at, that's the social planning of it, it's how we and reinforcing our role in assisting the community to remain healthy and cohesive and all those other things that are in the community plan.
Ethan?
Thanks, Mayor. Just going back to the increase of planting trees for 200,000. 2 quick questions. First of all, is that increase in annual planting? So is that 200,000 on top of any ongoing planting costs? So
Over
that-
and above the existing tree planting program. So it's
okay.
over and above.
So there's already money that's in that
Yes.
renewal, which
Yep.
Sharon will
Yep.
talk about in the next budget session. Is that right? Yes, awesome. Okay. Secondly, maybe going off of Councillor Koch's point, is it possible to get a breakdown or a bit more in depth of what the proposed plan will be to use that money? Is it possible to get that?
Absolutely, it
Yes,
would be
that-
possible. So I think if we take that on notice, thank you. And we get
Thank
some
you.
further detail around that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Because we're sort of 20 to 10 now, so getting a bit late. We haven't got around to council member. All right, thank you, everyone. I think we've sort of maxed out our questions. I'll take both of these away and try and make sense of them. Thank you, everyone. I think we'll call it quits for tonight. It's quite late now, but thank you. It's been really good discussion and it's given staff lots of ideas and lots of things to think about and maybe feedback. So thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Thanks, whoever's watching as well.